everybody, and welcome back. It's us. The Atheist Experience is on, and we are live June 30th, 2002. I'm your host, Martin Wagner. My co-host, Ashley Perrien, with me today.
Afternoon, folks.
And thanks for joining us all on this rainy, blustery summer Sunday afternoon. What a great day to stay indoors and watch TV, unless you're us, when we all have to get on the highway and make TV.
Actually make it.
Yeah. Thank you for joining us. This show is sponsored by Atheist Community of Austin, a nonprofit educational organization promoting positive atheism and the separation of church and state, which scored a major victory this coming week, and we'll be discussing that during the show quite extensively, I suspect. ACA holds weekly meetings every Sunday morning, 10:30 a.m. at Hot Jumbo Bagels, 307 West 5th Street between Guadalupe and Lavaca, except for the first Sunday of each month when we have our lecture series in the Longhorn Room of First Cafeteria at North Cross Mall. Next Sunday, being the first Sunday of July, will be our next lecture, and our speaker will be the outreach director for the Texas Freedom Network, who is remaining nameless, right? I still don't know who this person is.
I keep forgetting. They mentioned it at the bagel shop today, but I forget to get it down.
Okay, yeah, we need to kind of get on, know who our speakers are.
Well, it's next week. By the time we do this show next week, it'll be past history. So.
Yeah, so we'll be able to say who it was. We're so organized here. That's happening next Sunday at First Cafeteria, North Cross Mall. As I said, the outreach director for Texas Freedom Network, which is a local, state civil liberties watchdog group, will be speaking on the subject of school textbooks. So that should be very interesting and informative. Other ACA events include Godless Gamers, which takes place Monday night. It's 7 p.m. at the home of Russell and Virginia Glasser. For information on how to get there, talk to Russell or Ginny. ACA Happy Hour takes place Thursday evenings at about 7:38-ish. People trickle in all through the evening to Antonio's Tex-Mex, which is near the intersection of Highway 183 and Interstate 35. And that's a fun evening event for people who don't make it to the Monday morning or the Sunday morning events. And let's see, what else? The nonprofits, can't forget them. That's our weekly internet radio show, also sponsored by the ACA, which plays on the atheistnetwork.com website at Saturday afternoon, 2 o'clock p.m. Your web browser will need the Real Player plugin in order to hear the audio stream, and there's a live chat feature that you can log into to interact with the program. Nonprofits is hosted by Jeff D. And co-hosted by Vic Farrow and Mary McManamy. And Russell Glasser also appears on the show and speaking, and then just random guests, whoever pops up. It's a lot of fun to listen to. Saturdays at 2 p.m. There it is, bottom of your screen. Okay, so let me see. Other events just upcoming include the November 2nd tentative date still for the Godless Americans March on Washington. This is an event sponsored by American Atheists, with whom our group is not affiliated. But this is coming up in November, sort of, everyone's done their little March on Washington, so it's our turn. And for more information on that and how that's plans of that are progressing, you may check out the godlessamericans.org webpage. So, quite a lot going on.
Yep, it's been
what a week we've had, hasn't it? Yeah, my goodness.
Been one of the more active ones. So.
Yeah, it's just one of those. Yes.
So, jumping into news, I guess.
We might as well, because it's the big topic, is it not?
Okay, yep, yeah. We'll start with the big topic of the week. Hindu group recommends cow dung against nuclear fallout.
Okay.
Psych. A Hindu nationalist organization is urging people in India to smear themselves in cow dung in the event of nuclear war.
Ah, well, that's...
They claim it will protect against radiation burns. The Uttar Pradesh Cow Protection Commission also recommends daubing buildings in cow dung to protect them against nuclear fallout. What is it? You can protect fully yourselves by covering the roof with cow dung. Applying cow dung paste to the body from head to toe will serve as extra shield.
Okay.
Now, it's a funny story, but the scary thing is...
People are buying this?
I'm sure some of the uneducated populace is buying it, and that is what is so scary. Because it minimizes the dangers of nuclear war. Wow. Nuclear war, that's not that big a deal. Get a little cow dung on me and I'll be fine. No, you won't.
Well, it's because they believe cows are sacred beings, right? I mean,
yes.
They believe that they're they're imbued with
And
some
I-
sort
and
of
The only thing I can
supernatural.
the only thing I can guess is that some of the leaders are putting this out to allay fears in the public. They know for a fact that cow dung ain't going to do anything in case of a nuclear bomb on your house.
I mean, yeah,
it's not gonna
cow in the
protect
country will be, a Big Mac.
Yeah,
and
it's not going to protect anything at all.
Yeah.
But
It's interesting.
But it's scary that
if
they're
it were being
trying
put
to
out,
minimize fears.
Yeah. Well, there is there is a group over there, the rationalists,
Yes.
who go around the
yes.
country in India, debunking all of these bogus, Maharishis and fakers. And so I'm wondering if they have anything to say in response to this. But it's interesting to speculate if, in fact, the government did put. But of course, they're all now saying,
That's true. That's
they're all now saying, no, we're not going to have a nuclear. I mean, we don't like each other, in effect,
Yeah.
but we're not going to go that far.
I sure hope they don't.
Yeah. Well, it's not looking as bad as it was about 2 or 3 weeks ago.
Yeah.
That's when it was really, the powder keg was sizzling, but now it seems to have cooled off a bit.
Yeah.
But there's still,
Hope so.
now the concern is, the Pakistan is harboring a bunch of Al Qaeda guys,
Oh.
and
Yeah.
so that's
Yeah. So.
yeah.
Okay. Well, do we want to go on with other news or just jump to the meat?
Well,
of it?
let's go on. Why not do the other stuff, and then we'll make like that'll be like our grand finale with the news, and we'll segue right into.
Let's see. I'll go with this one. And then
There
go
actually
back.
was other news last week, apparently. Yeah. Oh, that's a big one.
As
Yeah.
shocking as it is. Supreme Court okays school vouchers. The Supreme Court ruled Thursday that tuition vouchers are constitutional, a landmark church-state decision that could fundamentally change the educational landscape by allowing wider public financing of religious schools. The 5-4 decision allows taxpayer money to underwrite tuition at private or parochial schools if parents retain a wide choice of where to send their children. Like other recent rulings led by the court's conservative majority, the case allows blending of government and religion, and it takes that trend further than ever before. Vouchers are an education idea championed by conservatives, including President Bush, who call them a ticket out of the dismal and dangerous public schools. Opponents say that they are a sham and divert badly needed public money from the already strapped public schools.
Yeah, it's like they're just throwing up their hands and completely giving up on the public schools, which I think is kind of a shame. I mean, a lot of these inner city schools are dumps, right?
It's a shame, yes, but that's part of the problem. Is that for the last however many years, nothing has been done about it.
Well, that's true. Yeah.
And so I would rather see.
But they're working on
something.
they're working on the presumption that nothing now can be done about it. And I don't know that. Now, what's interesting, we have one guy in our group, Mark Lowy,
Yes.
who is actually a supporter of vouchers,
Yes.
although he for economic reasons. Now, the church-state
And me for similar reasons.
concern is that you will now have public money going towards these wildly fundamentalist schools, that are basically teaching disinformation about history and science and that sort of thing, and you will have taxpayer money. In other words, the government now funding schools that are, rather than educating, they're just engaging in religious indoctrination.
Yes, and these schools will eventually do very poorly because eventually when they start getting into college and stuff like that, they will realize that these schools are not teaching anything at all reliably, of any value.
Yeah.
And so these schools will either have to shape up or close down because they're not actually doing their job of educating the children.
Well,
So
yeah, but but by that time the damage will be done, and that's the concern.
yes, unfortunately.
But Amanda, Jeff's wife, likes to make the comparison of the foolishness, economic foolishness of vouchers. She compares it to saying, okay, let's say you have a city that has a really, really lousy mass transit system. And so instead of trying to fix the mass transit system, the local government gives every citizen a check for $100 towards the purchase of a car.
Yeah.
So it's not really, because one concern that she points out that I think is pretty interesting is what's going to happen if this voucher stuff, as it has done now apparently, passes? What are the private schools going to do? She thinks they're going to raise their rates. And they're going to double their rates for their tuitions in some cases, maybe.
It's
I don't know if
possible that they could,
yeah,
but the
it's possible.
school is still charging, we'll say $3,000
Yeah.
or something like that for it. Now they have the choice of getting $3,000, $2,500 from a voucher, $500 from the parents, or doubling their rates and not getting any extra money. that's not a good assumption. I mean, you can't just companies cannot just double their rates and say, hey,
Well,
cool.
apparently they can.
So-
I mean, it seems to work for the.
Yeah, but nobody then buys it.
Well, I don't know.
Well, fewer,
hasn't hurt tobacco.
They would get a lot less people because a lot of middle of the road families who can't afford the $3,000, but they can afford $500 or $1,000. They can now give all that money to the schools.
But see,
and the school will now be $3,000 richer than were before.
Yeah, but now here the question is though, who is really going to be taking advantage of this? Is it going to be like the underprivileged classes, whom you would assume that this was passed in the interest of helping, like the inner city and the urban families, or are we going to see affluent white suburban families who don't really have a problem financially? Sending their kids pretty much wherever they want to send them, going ahead and taking advantage of this in order to send their kids to these fundamentalist right-wing religious schools.
The richer folk will probably get a financial benefit because now these schools cost $2,500 less to them, essentially, than it did before.
Yeah,
so that's fine for them. The lower education families are going to get a chance to send their kids to a better school for slightly or significantly less money, possibly none, depending on the school. There are some that charge less than $2,500 or however much the voucher's for. But they could put a little money towards the education, and the kids will have a better opportunity in life to actually get out and do something rather than being stuck in these crappy schools.
Assuming that the school they get into, gives them a good education.
True, I wouldn't expect it to be all that much worse.
Yeah, well, I don't know.
Come on,
I'm sure we'll get
even a religious school is better than what some of the public schools are doing by not teaching anything at all.
Yeah. All right, well, there's no. You can't expect it in a. I mean that's. Yeah.
We're annoying our crew. At the moment.
Can't expect that a private school, or a parochial school will, for example, exercise perhaps better discipline than you get in a lot of the urban. Public schools, and there's something to be said for that. They won't necessarily tolerate the gang behavior or whatever you get. But again, then will those families who have that much dysfunction going on that their kids are out on the street dealing and cutting class in the first place, are they going to be the ones taking advantage of the vouchers in the first place? Right? I mean, is it going to be all the people that the vouchers are presumably supposed to be the ones helping the most? Are they even going to be the ones taking advantage of it? I thought the whole idea was, okay, we have these crap public schools. They're not helping out. We have terrible discipline problems. We have youth crime.
But at that point, with those kind of families, I think there's a bigger problem than just plain old money.
Still,
and
right.
I mean, that's just a function of having parents that are irresponsible. They don't care about their kids' future.
But isn't this though a misguided act of saying, oh well, here we have this social problem, so let's just throw some money at it. And that'll fix it. Isn't that kind of what's going on here with the vouchers?
Well, no. Throwing money at it would just be, let's give more money to public schools and say, hey, maybe they'll be able to fix it on their own by giving yet more money to it. Yeah. And, probably not.
That's a good point. Well, maybe we'll have some. I'm sure we'll have some callers throwing in their 2 cents on that. But interesting, though. All right.
Okay, so that's that one. Next one. Might as well go on to another humorous story.
Okay.
Keep it all lighthearted for the seriousness. Let's see. Public schools are under more pressure to accommodate all private. Private schools can
discriminate.
See,
that's the church-state concern.
And that is definitely a valid
that's not so
point.
much the that's partly a socioeconomic concern, but that's mainly the church-state concern. The violation concern there is public schools. What you have are, well, if you have a Christian school, right? Yeah. Then that's like, oh, here's public money going towards a private institution that only wants to accept a certain type of person and isn't. Whereas public schools have to try to bring everybody in. If you're in the community,
and the more discriminating you are, the less you're going to get anyway. If you're keeping people out, here I am. I'm coming to you with $3,000.
But
you won't take my.
But a religious school is.
But
a religious school is going to discriminate.
How is it not?
All right, let's go on.
We're going to go.
Save this one for the calls.
Yeah, we're going on because we're really annoying our call screener.
Well, see, he used to.
I'm annoying.
Well, he used to be co-host of the show a couple years ago, so he's chomping at the bit over there. It's like.
Okay, congregation gives thanks for chainsaws.
Okay.
About 30 people attended the Tapawera and District's Community Church's first service dedicated to the chainsaw at St. Peter's Some wore overalls and brought along their chainsaws and protective gear.
Okay.
During the service, Pastor Havel Stephen Smith said there were no biblical references to chainsaws.
That's
Although there were
Thank you for that.
references to working with saws. There you go.
it all fits, doesn't
Exactly.
it?
It's so obvious. Children were given pictures of chainsaws to color in, and they presented, which they presented,
And the red crayons ran out very fast.
which they presented to the congregation at the end of the service. One child drew Jesus holding a chainsaw. Bless you, my son. After the service, members of the congregation went outside for a chainsaw orchestra. Mr. Stephen Smith conducted the orchestra through a rising crescendo and in a Mexican wave.
I'm not even going to ask what a chainsaw orchestra, how that's supposed to function.
I guess they all have slightly different sounds.
Well, there's a lot of industrial bands out there who like sample chainsaws
I'm sure, but it's just kind of ironic. A church.
Okay, so the point, what are all these people loggers? The point of this exercise was what? Just weirdness. Okay.
Chainsaws were taken to a church in Tapawera yesterday as the community celebrated God's gift of Still, Husqvarna, and Black & Decker. God bless Black & Decker.
So, when the Pope canonizes Leatherface, I'll start to worry. Yeah. All right.
Okay.
Well, that was strange.
And let's see. I don't really want to go over that one all that much. I say we just cut to it.
All right.
So that's 15 minutes into it. Okay. The big news of the week, if you hadn't already guessed.
Yeah, if you've been living under a rock since Wednesday.
Yes. Is the idea that making children recite the Pledge of Allegiance, one nation under God, has been ruled unconstitutional. Now, there are many articles out there and many headlines which are basically misrepresenting the issue, saying,
there's
the Pledge of Allegiance ruled unconstitutional.
Right.
Bollocks.
Yeah.
Essentially, what was ruled unconstitutional is the fact that they were putting under God in there and also requiring children to say it during school, in public schools. That is what the problem is.
Now, the Supreme Court has already ruled that if a child has the right to abstain from reciting the pledge in class.
Yes.
But the further concern there is that what it does is it's basically a big scarlet letter on that kid when he does that. It puts them in a very untenable, uncomfortable position of being, yes, I'm the dissenter. And we all know how difficult life as a kid or teenager is if you're the outsider. It's a very, very cruel time of life, and so that's...
Yeah, essentially what we're talking about is what they ruled as being the coercion test. There are three different tests that they applied to this. The Lemon test, the endorsement, and coercion test.
Yeah.
Now, from their reading here, what the coercion test actually is, the court formulated the coercion test, which it held unconstitutional the practice of including invocations and benedictions in the form of non-sectarian prayers at public school graduation ceremonies. It relied on a principle that, at minimum, the Constitution guarantees that government may not coerce anyone to support or participate in religion or its exercises, or otherwise to act in a way as to establish a state religion or religious faith, or tends to do so. Now, basically, what that means, and actually it goes on here, noting that there are heightened concerns when protecting freedom of conscience from subtle coercive pressure in the elementary and secondary public schools. Courts held that school district supervision and control of graduation ceremony put impermissible pressure on students to participate in, or at least showed respect during prayer. Basically, since you have children at school, they don't have...
Captive audience.
It's captive audience, and essentially they have a heightened concern to go along with everybody. You're told by your parents and everybody else to, do what the teacher says, be nice, go along. And so even if they don't agree with it, they've still kind of got this mixed feeling that, well, I've got to do what everybody else is doing. Well, no,
you don't want to not fit in. That's like the worst thing in the world if you're a teenager or an adolescent.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And
it's very scary.
Yeah, it's...
And
basically it goes on to say, why is this that's essentially why it's a bad thing at this point.
Yeah.
The Pledge of Allegiance to the flag describes the United States as one nation under God. To be sure, no one is obligated to recite this phrase, but it borders on sophistry to suggest that a reasonable atheist would not feel less than a full member of the political community every time his fellow Americans recite, as part of their expression of patriotism, for love of their country, a phrase he believes to be false.
Precisely. Yeah, that's the whole problem with it, is that it's a clear indication that we are indeed expressing favoritism towards people with a theistic belief system.
Yeah, if you're a member of the
you are preferred if
God-believing community, then
if you have a theistic belief system. And the claim that it is that the phrase "under God," which I think some courts have made in the past, is just this sort of generic statement that doesn't really have any specific application. It's nonsense, right? It's pure nonsense. Of course. We all know, there are a lot of people in the American public don't know the history of how the circumstances that led to the insertion of "under God" in the Pledge of Allegiance in 1954. It was very clearly had a strong religious intent.
Blatantly obvious.
Yeah, it was a reaction to the McCarthyism and the Red Scare fears of the 50s, and it was an attempt to insert this statement, this very bold statement, delineating us, from the evil commies over there.
Yeah.
In a religious way. So to pretend that the insertion of the phrase "under God" in the pledge had no religious intent is completely, transparently disingenuous.
Yeah. President Eisenhower, during the act signing ceremony, stated, "From this day forward, the millions of our school children will daily proclaim in every city and town, every village and rural schoolhouse, the dedication of our nation and our pledge to the Almighty."
Yeah, well, guess what?
It's obvious what it was for.
And Knights of Columbus were involved in that in 1950. Thanks, Vic. But guess what? The government doesn't have the right to tell its citizens to do that.
Yeah.
The government doesn't have the right to say, you will worship this way. That's the whole point of separation of church and state. What the insertion of "under God," in Eisenhower's own words, was the government taking away the rights of parents to control their child's religious education and putting that control in the hands of the schools and the local school boards and the government.
Yeah.
It was the government saying, thanks, parents, but you don't. We're gonna.
You're apparently not doing the job.
We're gonna indoctrinate. We're gonna indoctrinate your kids for you. We're gonna, claim this sort of eminent domain over the minds of your children and tell them to pledge to a deity,
and even
whether you like it or not.
And even something as generic as monotheism, it's still a religious idea.
Sure.
Polytheism, no theism, whatever. Those ideas are completely excluded, and there are several religions that have polytheism or no theism.
Well, you have there's pantheism, which is a sort of strange. There's Hinduism has
gods.
Thousands of gods, but they're all sort of aspects of a single godhead.
Okay.
So it's kind of interesting that way. That's a simplification, the way I just put it. But
Buddhism is always the example of no god.
Well, but then there's another interesting thing on the. We'll talk about Michael Newdow in a minute, and I'm still trying to get in touch with him to conduct an interview with him on this program. Hopefully, in the next couple of weeks, we'll be able to do that when this headache dies down. But all the furor. But on his site, which again we'll talk about him and his site in detail in a minute, there is a poll that says, "What if the pledge said one nation under no God?"
Yeah.
Would that be right? And of course, I think I answer, and the correct answer to that should be no. That should not be permissible either.
Yeah.
Okay, any pledge or any statement that the government is going to compel people to recite as your oath of allegiance to the country should not include any opinion pertaining to a theistic belief system, pro or con.
Is that essentially saying that you cannot be a patriot if you don't believe in monotheism? Or no God, or whatever it says in there? Of course not.
Ideally, the government can't tell you what opinion to have on theistic questions. That's what religious freedom is all about. We're getting, again, signals from... We're being distracted too much by our phone. Knock it off over there, yeah?
But yeah, it's obvious to us, at least, that you can obviously be a very strong patriot without believing in God.
It's obvious to us,
at least.
It's obvious to us, but it's not obvious to 86% of the American populace who's, the religious right and the religious community in this country has done a very disturbing thing, which is that they've staked a claim on essentially everything, I mean, religion, and particularly Christianity, wants to stick its nose in absolutely everything.
Yeah.
Okay, so you can't be, if something about gardening, right? I mean, there's probably, the Christian ways to do gardening. If they probably have a religious viewpoint on that. Anything.
They have Christian long distance services.
But particularly, those are hysterical. Yeah, your 3 minutes are up, sir. But this whole equation of theism equals patriotism, I think, is one of the most damaging things, and has created the greatest amount of intolerance. In this country for the past 225 years in this country, more than anything. And that's something that we really need to go ahead and shuck. And you cannot have people espousing this idea of, we have religious freedom here, and we have freedom to believe what you want, and that's what makes our country great. But if you don't believe like the majority, then screw you. Basically, you're a bad guy, and you're less favored than another person. I mean, it's definitely Christians wanting to have more rights under the than everyone else under law in this country, and that's
what's actually surprising is when I first heard about this whole decision, I was kind of worried that maybe it was on some kind of soft basis and it wouldn't really stand up or anything like that.
Well,
but if you actually read over this entire decision, they use the 3 different tests to apply to both the 1954 decision and also should kids be required to read in school. The Lemon test, coercion, and establishment, or something else, one other, I can't remember offhand. But essentially, they say in here that failing any one of those tests would mean that it's unconstitutional. However, just for the sake of argument, let's go through all 3. And it fails all 3. And so, essentially, from a legal standpoint, I don't see how this could be overturned. It's pretty cut and dry. Well, as far as I can tell.
It can be overturned, right, if the legislators, which they clearly do not, don't care about the legal question.
True. They're just going to say, well, hey, that's what the law says.
I mean, this is all about, these are people who think that they answer to a higher power, and that the higher powers, takes precedence over the laws that, you see, in the same breath they'll claim that God gave us our laws, but then God is also the higher power that allows us to disregard the laws. If they somehow get in the way of indoctrinating the public into this higher power.
Elected officials are supposed to be there by God.
Yeah.
God is the one who put them there. So
it's just amazing.
Bullets to that. Well, maybe Bush, but so.
But anyway, now I know that before you go on, I mean, there's more to do, but I'm sure we will probably get quite a few calls today pertaining to this whole
most likely
people claiming, giving us the old saw about America's a Christian nation founded by Christians and yada yada yada. Wrong-o. Okay, we have a copy of the U.S. Constitution here. I always find that it's good to do a preemptive strike on this kind of thing.
Bring it on.
Settle down there, Tiger. They may well do it. Just stating again that here is exactly what the First Amendment says for those folks who are still unclear on it. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. Okay, now that means the government must remain 100% neutral in religious matters. It cannot promote and it cannot restrict.
Yes.
Okay. And now I've heard a lot of Christians try to argue, they only put that in there so that we wouldn't have an official state religion, but it didn't. Doesn't mean that the government still can't promote religion. Wrong. Listen, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion. Okay, that simply means promotion in any sense.
Yes.
It's not strictly limited to you can't make one religion the state religion. It says it cannot respect an establishment of religion. So it's a clear statement of total neutrality that the government must show towards religious belief. I mean, that is what religious freedom is all about. Okay, the citizen, and only the citizen, has the right to decide for himself or herself what to believe or not. Government can't say a word about it. So that's what it's about. And here, in addition, and here's something that a lot of state constitutions violate. You have the no religious test shall ever be required as qualification to any office or public trust under the United States. And a lot of state constitutions, including our own Texas state constitution, violates that. So, it's very clear that the U.S. Constitution is intended to be a perfectly religiously neutral document in the interest of protecting the rights of individual citizens to worship or not worship as they see fit. Okay? And for people who think that this is a Christian document, folks, there are no quotations from Scripture in this document. Jesus Christ is never mentioned at all. God is only mentioned in the very beginning, where it talks about the year of our Lord as being the date that this was drafted. And the year of our Lord is a literary convention that, at the time of referring to the dates of events. Anno Domini.
In the year of our Lord.
Yeah, that's a literary convention, and unlike under God in the Pledge, it was not put in there as a specific, as a statement intended to take a position. There's just a literary convention, and religion is only mentioned in this document as prohibitions.
Yes.
Okay. So
can't do this stuff.
And just in case there's any other confusion, we have John Adams, who there is the Treaty of Tripoli, Article 11 in 1791, where he said the government of the United States is not in any sense founded on the Christian religion. And Thomas Jefferson, who had a few choice things to say. And we've read this one out many times on the show, but this is a good time to do it again, where he said, the Christian God can easily be pictured as virtually the same God as the many ancient gods of past civilizations. The Christian God is a three-headed monster, cruel, vengeful, and capricious. If one wishes to know more of this raging three-headed beast-like God, one only needs to look at the caliber of people who say they serve him. They are always of two classes, fools and hypocrites. That's pretty strong stuff, but that comes from, the Constitution was drafted by both Christians and non-Christians. And it was drafted in such a way as to protect anybody with any belief system from any sort of interference by the government. That's what it's about. So anyway, I was, Wednesday, I was, but here's the problem. Here's the problem. The overwhelming majority of the public is thoroughly uneducated on these histories. They don't know what the intent of separation of church and state is. They don't know what it was for. They don't know what it was put in the Constitution
and they don't
to accomplish.
Don't know what was decided on Wednesday.
Yeah, and they, you have, the religious right, among other people, perfectly happy to distort that history to make it seem as if, separation of church and state is some sort of, evil plot by bad guys, to wipe Christianity out and and stamp religion out, and it's not the case at all. I've actually heard, you actually hear people, if you watch some of these Christian television shows, say things like, there's no such thing as separation of church and state, and it's just it's a big evil lie. I mean, it's like, good, and that's terrifying, because there are people, who really want to see America stop being a free country and become purely theocratized.
Oh, absolutely.
They want to Talibanize America under the cross, and it's like, no, thanks, sorry, don't want to have that. So let's see, what else do you have in there?
Let's see, got a couple quotes in here. Let's see, the federal defendants do not dispute that the words under God were intended to recognize a supreme being.
There you go.
At a time when the government was publicly inveighing against atheistic communism.
Where's that again?
Nonetheless, the federal defendants argue that the pledge must be considered as a whole when assessing it when assessing whether it has a secular purpose. The flaw in defendants' argument is that it looks at the text of the pledge as a whole and glosses over the 1954 Act. As was the case with the amendment, the Alabama statute, and Wallace, the legislative history of the 1954 Act reveals that the Act's sole purpose was to advance religion in order to differentiate the United States from nations under communist rule. The First Amendment requires that a statute must be invalidated if it is entirely motivated by a purpose to advance religion.
Yeah, and I would argue that communism is, quasi-religious in its own right, but that's... Anyway, so that's very clear under the ruling, and again, the problem is, you're getting back to the whole topic of the majority of the American public being unaware of this history and unaware of the intent of church-state separation as it was drafted in the Constitution. What happened was this ruling on Wednesday just appeared out of the blue, right?
Yes.
I mean, people woke up in this, this stunning headline, court rules pledge unconstitutional. Of course, the initial reaction was the hell, and then it moved on to anger and confusion and rage and what have you. And whereas if any attempt, even a pretense, has had of attempting to educate the public on what religious freedom really is, why it is that separation of church and state is a thing that protects religious freedom. It was designed to protect religious freedom. It wasn't designed to curtail religious freedom or oppress religion. It was designed to protect religious freedom. Without that sort of understanding, well, you know, naturally what you had is the hysteria that we had on Wednesday. I mean, I personally have never, in recent memory, that I felt prouder to be a citizen of this country than I felt on Wednesday.
Yeah.
It was like, wow, you know, America is, you know, at least for one brief shining moment,
somebody is recognizing
is an inclusive,
you
know, and is truly a pluralistic and inclusive society.
And it wasn't just, you know, we're mostly religious, but we'll tolerate you here. Don't worry about it. You know, but
you're
not really sick.
Very, very short-lived, but at least it was there for a moment, and I was tremendously proud. You know, because that's one of the great strengths of this country is that, you know, people who have the minority viewpoints, you know, can get out there and be heard. But of course, I'm concerned with this ruling sort of emerging in a vacuum.
Yeah.
You know, the furor that we have seen is, you know, clearly the result of just people not understanding what's going on.
True, but then again, the upside to that is even if this is struck down, which I'm still assuming it probably will be, unfortunately.
Well, it depends on how good a fight is put up.
At least people will start thinking and talking about it.
Yes.
Which is the first step.
Yeah.
So it may not last, but if people start talking about it, that's always a good thing.
In the meantime, Michael Newdow has had to put his daughter into hiding because of threats he is receiving.
Yep.
You know, which is, and no one seems to point out, you know, on all these conservative corporate news networks, you know, the whole sort of dichotomy between people in the religious community thinking they're more virtuous than everyone else.
Yeah.
And then but then the minute somebody disagrees with them, here come the death threats.
Yeah, I know, let's kill him.
Yeah, what's up with that? You know, so, you know, this whole idea that, you know, religion somehow makes you a better person doesn't seem to stand up too well. Anyway, there's RestoreThePledge.com is Michael Newdow's actual site, which has information about, you know, what he's up to and has a whole history of his this case here and how he's. Yes.
And if they're looking to restore the, you know, historical significance of the Pledge of Allegiance, this has only been under God for, you know, since '54.
Yeah.
It had a much longer history before that without it in there.
Yeah.
If you want to be historical, take it back out.
Yeah. I mean, I see no problem. The pre-1954 pledge is a pledge that every single American can recite with pride.
Yes.
Regardless of your creed. And isn't that what America is supposed to be about? It's like, doesn't matter, your creed shouldn't matter, you know, you are part of this great nation, this pluralistic, that's what it's supposed to be about.
Yeah.
You know, whether it will actually be about that at any time.
We're getting note that it was actually written in 1892, and the only other change it went between 1892 and '54 was to the flag, and then to the flag of the United States of America.
Yeah.
That was the only addition. Just state which flag. You know?
Yeah, I just clarified that point. But, all right, it's that time to go to callers, so we have Rock on line 2. So we'll go ahead and take that. Hello, Rock?
Hey, how you doing?
Just fine.
Had a couple little points. One is some people say this is establishment of monotheism, but even some monotheists would disagree with the pledge because it says we're under God, but some monotheists believe the earth is God. So we're not under that God, we're over that God.
Yes.
So
yeah, just for general, you know, state-church separation, there are a lot of, you know, people who are against this, which is a good thing.
Now you think that this is trivialization, but if you read the Minority Report, because remember it was a 2-to-1 ruling, and there was a Minority Report of a guy who liked the pledge the way it was. He said that he didn't disagree with any of the details of the two who made the ruling. He just said this is too trivial a matter.
Exactly, since it doesn't really
that was
mean
his only
anything.
thing.
Yeah, but clearly it does mean something.
Well, not to him.
Well, obviously, not to this fellow, but as Newdow pointed out in his interviews, it's like, you know, pick a religion that you don't practice, you know, and think this to Christians, and imagine if your child was having to go to school every day and say one nation under Buddha, or one nation under Vishnu, or one nation under the Earth Mother, or whatever you have, and then the problem becomes crystal clear. it's very obvious that in this case, in 1954, the intent was to refer in that passage to the Judeo-Christian God and no other. I mean, there wasn't even a pretense towards it being God, small g, God the vague concept. You know, it was very, very clear that the God that was meant to be referred to in the under God clause is the Judeo-Christian God. And so right there you have now a pledge which not only disqualifies unbelievers, but it disqualifies believers of religion that don't happen to be the mainstream religion. Rock, you there?
No, my only comment. Yep.
Okay.
Thanks.
Was that it? Oh, thanks for calling. All right. Okay. We have Doug on line 1, so let's see what this does. Doug?
Yes.
Hi, okay, we can hear you.
Yeah.
How you doing?
Just want to make a quick comment. I think you had mentioned, just when I was flipping the channels and I saw you on, you mentioned that the doctrine of separation of church and state is in the Constitution.
Well, those words are not in the Constitution, but the idea is.
That's what I was just trying to get cleared up.
yeah.
I heard Martin say that the doctrine of separation of church and state was in the Constitution.
Okay, yeah, I'm sorry if I was unclear on that. No,
Yeah.
I mean, the term wall of separation originated in a letter to the Danbury Baptist in 1801, written by Thomas Jefferson, but what he was referring to was the principle that is espoused in the First Amendment, which is that of government remaining neutral in matters of the religious beliefs of its private citizens. And so, I mean, so he coined the phrase at that point, wall of separation, to refer to that, which was already in the Constitution. But that's the first account that we have of that the term separation was actually used to refer to that. So,
Okay.
I'm sorry if my wording was unclear.
No, that's there was a comment earlier, just as I was flipping through it, and I maybe not even capture the early part of your conversation, but you said you were making references to people not knowing the doctrine of separation in church and state and why it was in the Constitution.
Oh, okay.
So I just want to get that clear.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
I appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, guys.
I'm sorry if I led to any confusion. So it was good. Will, and there's something. All right. Will?
Yes.
Hi, you're on the air.
Yeah, I was wondering if you guys have any problem with the fact that, well, let me just say first, I'm a Christian.
Okay.
I never said the Pledge of Allegiance in school, and it got me in a lot of trouble because I don't think it's right or constitutional for someone to force you to pledge allegiance to a country, period.
Okay. Which is actually a separate issue here that the under God I consider definitely unconstitutional. It shouldn't be there.
Obviously.
But the pledging in the first place, I also have questions about that. Is it really required that we have to make, second grade students pledge allegiance to a country? They don't understand what they're talking about, essentially. It's just a stream of words that they've got to say so that they can get on with their day.
And rote memorization of things does tend to strip them of their significance.
Oh, absolutely. There is absolutely no meaning to 90% of fifth graders out there.
There is a problem when something becomes simply this phrase that you have to stand up and recite every day. You go on autopilot after a little while, and if you were to ask the average 7th grader or 6th grader or 5th grader or even 12th grader in this country what a republic even is, they probably wouldn't be able to tell you, give you a good definition of the term republic. So yeah, I think that what would be better would be to improve the quality of education in our schools pertaining to our nation's history, political science, what it is that our framers were thinking and what they were all about when they were creating this great democratic experiment a couple hundred years ago. And at that point, the pledge becomes something that you're able to recite from a position of, I know what this means now, and I'm very proud to say it. Right. So you make a good point there, Will.
Well, also, I wanted to say one other thing. I don't know if you've mentioned it this week, but maybe last week or the week before, you were talking about the 1 minute of reflection, meditation, and prayer. That's a bunch of crap. That needs to be taken out because...
Unless they let kids play with their Game Boys.
Right.
Yeah. Well, we saw...
Separate but equal didn't work in the case of slavery, and it shouldn't be allowed. It's a farce to even try to say separate but equal in the case of religion.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be there. Religion has no place in schools. And the 1 minute that's just separate but equal for religious matters. which is complete and total crap.
Yeah.
Well, and a couple of problems with it. We've actually seen in Louisiana what happens with these so-called moments of silence is that suddenly one day they morph into moments of recited prayer.
Right.
And it's no longer a moment of silence. So that happened in Louisiana, and the court came down on it very correctly. And another problem that I have with it is that, again, it goes to, in this case, the school districts, the local governments, the government itself as a body, saying to students, here's your 60 seconds of the school day during which you get to think about your religious belief system, which I think is unconstitutional. What you have now, what we live in now is a country in which any student at any time of the school day can drop to his knees and pray until he's blue in the face.
Right.
You can pray in the lunchroom, pray in the gym, so pray before taking a test. I imagine a lot of students do that. So right now you have under our Constitution in this country all of the religious freedoms you could possibly want to have. You don't need the government saying, okay, between 9 a.m. and 9:01 a.m. in the morning will be our mandated moment of silence during which you get to reflect on stuff. If I were a religious student, my question would be, well, why can't I just reflect on this stuff whenever I feel like it? It's my right as an American citizen.
Right.
And
what is that 1 minute taking away from? I know it's only a minute, and that seems like a ridiculously small amount of time, but our public schools aren't doing a good job in the first place. Why don't you teach for that minute?
Yeah.
And it's not just that 1 minute, it's there's the set up and tear down for that 1 minute.
Right.
Okay, everybody sit down.
So it's actually 3 minutes, I guess, yes.
25, realistically.
Well, it depends on how unruly this is. If there's like a big, paintball fight going on, then, that might be, okay. But, we appreciate your feedback there, Will. Anything else?
Yeah. No, that's it. I just thought that, someone should say that it's a big farce and ridiculous that they're using separate but equal in the case of religion when it hasn't worked in any other legal area ever. And everyone sees it as crap, and if it's applied to race or anything else.
Or creed or special.
Right.
Well, you know who needs to hear these things is our congressmen.
Right.
And our representatives in Washington. So,
unfortunately, most of them believe that they do answer to a higher power in the case of
but you know what?
civil matters.
But you know what? They don't. They answer to us. They answer to we, the people.
Right.
Another thing that our Constitution is very clear about is that it puts the power in the hands of the people. It doesn't say we get this power from some divine entity. It says the power comes from the people. So whether they may think that they answer to some sort of higher divine authority, but in truth, legally, they answer to the citizens. Now, granted, most citizens are unfortunately going to take, I think, the misinformed viewpoint on this, but the more people in what is the minority viewpoint who actually just take a minute to write a letter or send an email or put in a phone call, you have that right to be heard, the right to say, hey, you know what, we all need to simmer down here and look at what the big picture is. And so I encourage, we can't do calls to action on this show, but it's your right as a citizen, and I encourage everyone to partake in it.
Right. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you, Will.
Okay,
Take
thanks.
care.
And actually, I got an email note that was forwarded me to some family members, which I don't see all that often anymore, which is why they forwarded it to me, saying that they're trying to get 1 million signed petitions together to get this overturned or whatever. And I did a reply all to everybody that who had originally sent it to me, and basically said, now, let's think about this and look at it for a minute. Essentially, 15% of our population is either atheists, non-believers, or polytheists. They don't follow the under God.
Or they're just not affiliated with a particular religion, and they want to stay that way, and they have that right.
Exactly.
They could be totally theistic, but just not say, well, but I don't go to church.
It's at minimum 15% of our people.
At least,
have a slight issue with under God. Now, what are we losing by taking out under God? We're not losing that much. Essentially, at least according to us,
you're not
losing absolutely nothing.
You're not losing anything.
But we're including 15% of people now who can actually say this with honor and believe it.
But that's the central distortion that the 85% is getting from guys like Falwell and Robertson and Ashcroft and George W. Bush and all the senators and every religious leader in this country, is that they're being told the government is trying to take away your right to believe. When they delete under God, they're
Yeah.
trying to take your religious freedoms away. They're being lied to in exactly that
not at all.
fashion. And this is why we have
They're
this sort of
allowing
hysteria.
religious freedom.
But they don't get that.
Anybody's religious freedom is now free to do whatever they want and not have to, kowtow and say under God.
Yes, but they don't get that.
Yes,
they don't. They don't get that point
because they're morons.
Well, they're misinformed. They're misinformed. These are they're not stupid. They've been misled.
Yes.
And they're continuing to be misled. And the people misleading them are the number one authority figures in their lives.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so they're not morons. They're just they're misinformed. We wouldn't be nice. So there are hundreds of millions of, non-bigoted, nice, considerate
Yes.
Christians. We
Yes,
just
very
heard
much
from
so.
one of them who understand what this is all about, and they can all be made to understand if they're just explained what the circumstance is in a fair and perfectly clear manner.
The headlines don't say all the news.
Norman is on 3. Let's see what he has to say about this. Norman.
Hey, what's up, guys?
Hey.
Hey, you got a copy of the Declaration of Independence around?
I don't have the Declaration, but I have the Constitution.
Yeah, that's just kind of what I was wondering. Is it any wonder to you, either one of you guys, that so many people believe that this nation was founded on Judeo-Christian principles and values when you read that document?
Well,
when you read the Declaration of Independence.
Well,
Kind
the
of
thing
a
is,
big
though,
deal. Pretty strong language in there,
The
right?
thing is, Norman, the thing is, the Declaration of Independence is not the document upon which the laws of this nation are based. The United States Constitution is that document.
Oh, I
no
totally
one is
understand
denying that most of our framers and the people who wrote the Declaration of Independence, no one is denying that those people had very, very strong religious convictions. And no one is denying that those people saw fit to express their religious convictions.
Martin, I think you denied that.
No, I didn't deny that. What I denied is the idea that the laws of this nation were intended to favor religion, and the laws of this nation were specifically based on particular religious principles. Now, and I read you a quote directly from John Adams, where he says, "The government of the United States is not in any sense founded on the Christian religion." He's not saying that America is not full of Christians.
Well,
He's not
of course,
saying that.
I think that that's obvious, and I don't think you need to have to read John Adams to figure that out.
Yeah.
I mean, when you say, you also don't really know what John Adams, when you take a little blurb from what he said, you don't know exactly the text or the context, of what he was referring to. Right, there is no law that says that you have to bow to Jesus Christ. But to say that somehow the laws of this country don't fall in line with Calvinistic theology or Christian principles is borderline absurd.
Well, but those laws also fall in line with the principles of many other non-Christian faiths
Very
around
much
the
agreed.
world, and they fall in line with faiths and religious beliefs that predated the Judeo-Christian tradition.
Very much agreed.
So
what
to
I'm
say
saying
that
is, again,
to
is
say that these
exclusively
principles,
it does not refer to Christianity. You're right.
yeah, but to say that these principles are unique to Christianity is what the religious right is saying, and that's false.
I don't agree. I totally agree with what you just said as far as it's not unique to Christianity. It's not. But
In fact,
to
I
say
can-
that somehow that the founders of this country weren't believers in Christ.
We weren't saying that. We weren't saying that. We were never saying that the founders of the country did not have strong religious convictions.
Okay.
The Constitution was written by men who were Christians, who were deists,
Yes.
some of whom were pantheists, men of many different religious faiths, who came to this country and who deliberately avoided mixing government and religion because these guys had seen the problems overseas back with the Anglican Church.
Absolutely.
And the interference with
No
the
question.
government in England, and they saw that you mix government and you mix religion, you get both things corrupted.
Okay.
And so they saw that, and that was why they never said, okay, we have to stamp out all religion in the lives of American citizens. What they said is we can't play any favorites, we can't interfere in any way with the rights of our free people to worship or not worship as they see fit. That was their intent.
Totally agree.
Okay, all
We're
right
on
then.
the same page.
Okay,
as far
good.
as the Declaration of Independence, do you recognize the Creator that is mentioned there being the same God in the under God of the Pledge of Allegiance?
I'm
It's
sure
possible.
it may very well have been the same God.
Do
But again,
you advocate? And this, I'll wrap it up with this because I'm trying to figure out exactly where you two stand, not as representatives for every atheist in the country, but just y'all.
okay.
Does the Declaration of Independence in any way upset you, or do you find it unconstitutional to have it there at the National Archives? Do we need to go in there and break it out, white out the portions that have Creator, and erase that part? Because that, frankly, to have that document in such a pivotal place, I mean, that is a huge building. You guys ever been there?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a big deal. And they've got that whole thing right there.
Well,
The
we can
under
answer you.
God, right there
Ashley's-
in front of your face.
We can answer you.
Yeah.
Ashley will start, and then I'll finish.
And essentially, since our laws aren't derived from that, since we're not running by that, there are no laws set forth in that, it's a historical document. I see no problem with it.
Okay.
There are paintings out there, millions of paintings that have, religious basis of some kind. It's art. It's history. Leave it alone. Don't touch it.
Okay.
It's a significant portion of our history.
I agree.
However, our laws were not written under, with a Bible in one hand and the pen in the other, copying stuff down.
That's
That's where I have the problem, and that's where you should get religion out, is in, ruling my life.
Yeah.
But a fact that it influenced our history, absolutely it did. There's no problem with that.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, yeah, I would deplore the idea of attempting to alter or suppress actual history in the interest of any sort of ideology. Again, I like to think that I am not taking an ideological point of view. I'm simply responding to what the Constitution makes abundantly clear, which is that no matter what faith you profess as an American citizen, or even if you choose to profess no faith, you still are a full-fledged American citizen with equal rights and protections under that Constitution. And that's my main concern. That's my main concern, is that the members of every faith or no faith, no one group, no one special interest group is getting played favorites.
And I just want to say real
Biden.
quick that Martin, I think that you've grossly misrepresented something.
Okay.
When you read the Constitution that's in your hand right now,
Okay, which bit?
read the first article again.
First article or the First
I
Amendment?
forgot what you're reading that regarding Congress shall make no laws.
Yeah, okay. Congress shall make no, that's the First Amendment. Congress shall
Yeah.
make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof.
Congress shall make no laws.
Right.
At what point did Congress make a law that did anything that what you're representing? And how is the Pledge of Allegiance fall into
Yeah.
anything having to do with what you're talking about?
I'll tell you, in 1954, the inclusion of the phrase "under God"
It's a
was
law.
expecting was a
Yes.
yeah. I
What
mean
is
that was a clause that was put in there that had specific religious intent.
No, but you're saying that the Pledge of Allegiance is a law? To say that is a law?
No,
That's
it's not a law to say it, but
That's
when
right,
the when
and
the
that's
text
why
of the
it's not in violation of the
Hold
first...
on. Now, who's doing the distorting here? Okay, every kid in America, again, and get back to what President Eisenhower wrote. Every kid in America in public schools is compelled to say that pledge. I mean, when I went to public school in this country. Everybody I know who went to public school in this country, that's the thing you did at the beginning of the school day. You stood up in front of class, you put your hand over your heart, and you recited that pledge. And there was no question of, now the Supreme Court may have came across later on and said, well, students shouldn't have to say it if they don't want to, but let's face it, who's going to not do it if the rest of the class is doing it, if the teacher's telling you, all rise for the pledge? And so there is compulsion involved in pledge recitation, and Eisenhower, he's quoted here in one of the opinions, what did he say? He said, from this day forward, the millions of our school children will daily proclaim in every city and town, every village and rural schoolhouse, the dedication of our nation and our people to the Almighty. And that was a president of the United States at the time, making a statement endorsing this activity. So I think it's very disingenuous to say, oh, well, it's not really a law.
No, it's not a law.
Yeah, but it's
Say that it is a law is totally misrepresenting the
It is
fact.
a requirement. It is a requirement.
It is not a law that you say it.
It is
if you say that it is, you are lying.
Okay.
That's reality.
But it's a requirement, okay? And it is, if it's
Okay.
not a law.
Here we go.
All right.
The California Education Code requires that public schools begin each day with appropriate patriotic exercises, and that the giving of the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America shall satisfy this requirement. Now, they can do other things and such, but they are required to do some form of patriotic act.
And they've made up their minds there that the pledge is going to be that patriotic act.
Yes, it's something very simple. It's very easy to do, essentially. Now, yes, they could have all the kids sit down during the day and, draw an American flag or something like that. Yes, that would count. But this is something to where all of them agree that this is what we're going to do.
Yeah.
So, yes, the children are basically required to say it.
No, okay. With that right there, I can do nothing but go, that's really a good point.
Okay.
I mean, because
Okay,
when
but
you read that,
say
and when you say that it is a requirement,
Yeah.
see, because look, in my understanding of it, it's still, now, not after having read what you read, but there is no law that says that I have to do anything like that.
But let's.
Do you understand my point? Like where I was coming from prior to when you read that, Ashley?
That is true, and also they say that students are not required to say this. They can opt out of it. If I don't agree with it, I can't.
But it took
stand
a Supreme Court decision to make that abundantly clear.
Yes,
I mean,
and also they are usually not given the option. You know, they're not saying we're going to say the Pledge of Allegiance. If you don't want to, you know, sit down or something like that. And also, children are basically taught, do what the teacher says.
Sure.
Do what, you know, go along with your friends, because, you know, you want to go along with everybody else, get along, essentially.
Yeah, well,
if they stand up and say, well, you know, I don't want to say this, I don't agree with it, they have just put a big red circle on their chest and say, hit me.
Yeah.
See, I think what you pointed out is
essentially
actually very good, and I'm glad that you read that to me, because I didn't have an understanding that that was a part of you know, that language requirement law. To me, that they're the same thing.
Yeah. I mean, Norman, I'm sure you remember. I'm sure you remember your own school experience, right? I mean, you said the pledge every morning, right?
Oh yeah, sure. And I remember
there was
where I grew up, there were a number of Jehovah's Witnesses in my area, and they wouldn't stand up, but they never got beat up or yelled at or anything like that. I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but I'm not saying that across the board, if you don't stand, you're going to be ostracized and spit on. I don't agree with that thinking either.
So, okay,
because it didn't happen where I came from.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, again, this is all, the central question here in this whole pledge debate is one of fairness.
I agree.
And I think that if you're going to have, you know, now, obviously people who belong to the majority religions, the majority faiths, like the Judeo-Christian faith, they're pretty much all on the same page when they have an understanding of what they believe God to be, in many cases, in some cases not actually, but when you take minority religions, you know, who are, you know, allowed to exist and allowed to function under our Constitution, and when you have people who profess no faith, you know, is a pledge that makes a specific statement concerning theistic belief fair to all groups of people across the board. And I would argue, and Michael Newdow argued, and the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals decided that it wasn't fair to all these people. And what I think that the whole issue can be settled if we just go back to the pre-1954 pledge and have a pledge that every American, regardless of creed, can say with pride. You know, I take great pride in my American citizenship, and I would take great pride in reciting the pledge without that clause in it. And I really don't see how not having that clause in the pledge interferes with those people who are Christian and who are Jewish and who are part of majority religious faiths, are in any way infringed upon in their right to go to church, have devotionals at home, do any sort of religious activity or outreach in their private lives that they want to do. So that's the main concern that's at the root of the entire pledge debate right now. So
thank you.
Anyway, we appreciate your time, Norman. We got to go on to other callers.
No, I appreciate it, guys. Thank
Take care.
Thanks.
Okay. All right. Who's next? I guess Howard on line 1. Hello, Howard?
Yeah.
How are you doing?
All right, great.
Yeah.
Great to talk to you guys. I always enjoy getting to watch your show, and I'm glad to know that there's other people out there that kind of think along the same lines I do.
Oh.
And what I wanted to say about the specific to this issue is that what's really disconcerting to me is all the politicians jumping through their butts couldn't jump through their butts fast enough to get out there and call this stupid. Even the Democrats, Tom Daschle called it nuts. And
and what did they do? What did they do? They engineered a photo op for themselves. Yeah. Instead of dealing with it and instead of addressing the legality of the issue, they all rushed out to the Capitol steps to recite the pledge and to have a nice picture for the newspapers.
Right, and jump up and down when it gets to the under God part. And that's, shouldn't be there.
It's grandstanding, and it's
basically just a blatant misunderstanding. All the headlines are saying, the Pledge of Allegiance ruled unconstitutional. They're not saying anything about what the actual fact of the matter is. That
of course not. They don't. Facts are always, going to get in the way, especially when you're dealing with anything that has to do with religion. That's the whole idea of it, and that's the problem that this nation faces right now. Because really, in the larger scope of things, what we have is a religious battle going on, fixing to happen on the world stage. It's already pretty much happening. You can see it really bubbling up, and the thing that happens with America right now is you have so many people who really do believe or want to believe in a supernatural being that is somehow going to save the day for them on their side. And that's a really scary situation to be in right now, because really we have no real defense against people who are fundamentally believing a religion that
well,
to the
9/11
point where they
proved
want
that.
to kill us.
Yeah, it's one thing. And now we're getting to like a broader issue of world politics, and
Right, but I see that this is part of that. This is one piece of the fabric. People are retreating into mythology and the supernatural to protect them from something that's really scary that's out there, and it's happening on both sides of this spectrum. And it really is. America is throwing away the things that really make America great, that are really the things that have been worth fighting for, that all this stuff about the greatest generation dying and all this stuff, those guys really died for something that was really worth it. But that is being whittled away slowly but surely, and the religious people are contributing to that. And I think that really Christianity, at its essence, is incompatible with democracy. And I've been thinking this for years, and now I see it where it's really starting to happen. And it really scares me, because things are going to I think they're going to probably be a little bit worse here before they get better. And I don't know what's going to come out for America on the other side.
Well, you're right.
If it winds up being a theocracy, then it was all for naught.
Well, you're right, and hopefully our Constitution will weather that storm. You're right. Any sort of dogma, right? Any sort of dogma is antithetical to freedom. Okay, and if democracy is the idea of personal individual liberties, then any sort of dogma, whether it's Christian, whether it's Islamic, whether it's based on any other sort of religion, will fly in the face of that very principle. Because when you have these rigid ideologies that are inflexible.
Exactly, and it's just what you're talking about earlier, is that they have co-opted the idea of patriotism. They've said you can't be a patriot unless you're a God-fearing American, and you got to believe in our particular brand of God. And I'll tell you, the one thing about that, they talk about this under God phrase in the Pledge of Allegiance being added because of godless communism. Well, atheism was the one good idea that the Soviet Union had.
Well,
that was it.
Yeah, but the Soviet Union specifically, I would argue that what they really did, in fact, was the reason they banned the church over there was because it was, it had this power base, right?
Right.
And Stalin didn't want his power base threatened by anybody at all. So, he wanted to be God. He wanted the state to be God. And that's so you're talking about some power-hungry lunatic.
It's a completely different beast than what I think of myself when I say I'm an atheist.
But atheism, it's as long as there have been supernatural and religious belief systems in human culture, there's always been somebody who has said, I don't really necessarily believe that stuff. And so that person is an atheist. In fact, Jeff D told me, and I haven't checked this out.
Up until a certain point in time, they were always killed.
Well, there was that.
And if you look at the the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, that was written sort of at the tail end of the Enlightenment period. The beginning of the Enlightenment period, anyone who thought that way was killed. Somewhere in the middle of that period, you had David Hume, you had all those guys that you finally wind up, with Locke and all those characters. You wind up with Jefferson on the other end of it, putting it kind of together. It's really not, conspicuous by its absence in all those founding documents is Jesus Christ is really an explicit description of God or anything. They talk about a creator, but what does that mean? It's just for lack of a better term. And it's like,
well, again, remember a lot of those men had deistic beliefs, which is sort of a definition of God in some sort of vague natural sense that's personal to the individual believer.
They read Spinoza, and they had kind of a pantheist idea.
Sure,
there was all kinds of stuff like that floating around. Some of it's legit still. But
and so this is, and I think that it was the very diversity of creeds that existed among all of the founding fathers. You did have practicing Christians among the founding fathers, of course.
Right.
And you had these guys who were deists and pantheists, and you had these people from multiple religious traditions, all of whom realizing what situation they were in with each other and saying, because of this, we've got to have the government not dictating what religion is preferred or what religion is not preferred, what religion is okay, and not really expressing an opinion on the private beliefs of its citizens in any sense. And that way, we're all protected. Deist over here, Presbyterian over here, Methodist over here, Baptist over here,
except
Pantheist
that they're
over here.
constantly whittling away at it and trying to make you appear that you're unpatriotic if you don't believe in God.
Yeah, and that is profoundly unfair and wrong.
And that's one of the things that I think that people have to stand up for and really, You know, the thing is, I'll tell you another slant that this is very interesting is that as long as you believe in some religion, you can believe, you know, that flying snakes come out of your earlobes or something. You know, it's like as long as you believe in some kind of thing, you know, whacking the heads off chickens and dancing around, that's okay. You know, that's
Not
why
all chicken.
Christians can kind of accept Jews. You know, they, you know, even though they've hated Jews and they blame them for killing Jesus and all this stuff, all of a sudden, oh, you're a Jew. Oh, well, that's okay because, you know, at least you believe in something.
Yeah.
But
I mean, there's
if you say you're an atheist, well, then it's free, it's open season on somebody who doesn't believe.
I know. It's interesting that scarcely 1 month after the September 11th attacks, the public opinion poll showed that Muslims still had a higher favorable opinion in the general American populace than atheists did.
Right.
You know, and that's just bizarre. You know,
Right.
You know, you're right. There is this blind spot when it comes to well, as long as you believe something, that I guess makes you okay. And it's because religion has co-opted this idea of belief equals virtue. Okay, the mere act of believing something religious is the most virtuous act a human being can engage in. Conversely, skepticism and doubt and religious criticism is equated with a sinful nature and, you know, being a bad guy.
Right.
And which I think is one of the things about religious philosophy that I object to most strenuously is this idea that the very reasoning capabilities that human beings have that distinguish us from other species is the thing that religion itself characterizes as being our most sinful act.
Right.
So it's, to me, I find that very dismaying, and you know, it leads to a lot of the problems that we have right now with misunderstandings and people being treated unfairly for not believing the right thing.
Well,
for not believing the right thing makes you a bad guy.
Right, and also the idea that morality is only capable within a religious setting of some kind, no matter what it is.
Yeah.
You know that if you don't believe in a religion, then you are immoral in some way and unethical. You know, it's like, man, you don't have to look too far right now to find all sorts of moral lapses everywhere you look, and it doesn't matter what a religion is being professed. But yet that continues to go on, and I think it's time, actually, you know, this whole thing with let's come right back to the Pledge of Allegiance thing. You know, even though I knew this was going to get all stirred up, and I knew all those politicians were going to jump through their butts trying to get out there, be the first in line to say the
Hopefully there will be a
pledge.
dialogue. Hopefully it will instigate a dialogue. Hey, we appreciate hearing from you. It's a great call, and please call us back anytime. But we got other guys lined up, and the clock's ticking. So
thanks a lot. Thanks
we
for what
appreciate
you do.
hearing
Thanks
from
for
you,
calling.
and
Bye.
take care.
And yeah, the scary thing is that religion and patriotism can also be linked pretty closely. A lot of people are always caught, you know, you go with your religion and that's the truth. Nobody else is right. In patriotism, you know, defend our country. Why? Well, because that's what you're supposed to do, right? You know.
Well, you're saying
so
they're both dogmatic ideas.
Yeah,
No, I won't.
essentially, yes.
Look, any position-
you can learn about why America is strong and do you agree with its policies and should you fight for it and agree with it and all that kind of stuff, and that's all well and good. Unfortunately, that isn't usually what happens. You know, having something like the Pledge of Allegiance is pure, you know, just stand up for our country, pledge allegiance. Why? Don't worry about it.
Okay, well, this gets back to what we were talking about earlier when the pledge is simply degenerated into this rote act that you do on autopilot every morning without having any real concept of the significance of its meaning.
Exactly.
Which is why, you know,
Teach people
Yeah,
why they should be patriotic. You know, give them the ideas. Here's what we agree with in this country, and here are the you know the strong foundations. That's why we're a great nation, or whatever you want to say.
Yeah.
But
I'll tell you
then
right
give
now.
them a reason other than
I'll
just
tell you
this
right now.
blind
I'll give you a good
patriotism.
reason. We're a great nation because shows like ours are able to be on television, and people who have unpopular opinions like ourselves are allowed to express our opinions and engage in dialogue. And I've lived overseas. I've lived in the Middle East.
Yeah.
I've lived in Singapore. I've lived in other countries where those freedoms aren't that we completely take for granted here aren't evident. And so I've seen, you know, firsthand the differences there, and I prefer the way we have things here.
Yeah.
You know, personally.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
have. But
Let
you're
the
right.
best
A lot
idea
of people don't have that perspective. You're
Yeah.
right. But any sort of ideology can be taken to a fanatical extreme, and that's got to be checked. Anyway, Dennis is on line 2. I'll go on the air. Dennis.
Yes.
Hi. How you're on the air? Thanks for
Pretty
waiting.
good. Yeah, I have a comment or a question. I had an interesting experience recently where I went into jury duty. You know, they swear you in and they select all the jurors. And so I was like one of 50 people. And of course, when they got to the oath part, they basically included the, "so help you God" phrase. So everyone else said, "I do," and I said, "I do not." And so the judge, asked me what's going on. Yeah. And so I had to ask for a civil, oath or civil affirmation. And I was given it, so I was able to say, "I do" to that. And it was it's like here I had to, stand out. I was one of 50 who had to defy the whole, situation, and specifically ask for this non-religious oath. And I thought Texas law had changed where they aren't supposed to do that anymore.
Yeah, I don't know. I did jury duty about 2 years ago, and I had a similar experience. But they do the big cattle call where they tell you it's at the Palmer, and you go down there, and when you get and there's hundreds of people, and from whom they select their jury pools. And at that event, where you're all just sitting in bleachers, and so it's this massive room, and they have everyone stand. And at that, they had a God oath, from which I abstained. And when then it came time to select the jury pools, they said, "Now anybody who has questions or problems or this, that, or the other, get in this line, and you can talk to a bailiff or what have you." And so I did that. And I was standing in line waiting, and then they had a bailiff coming up and down the line in case there's anybody who had a problem that could be helped more quickly than that. And I told the guy, "Look, I don't have a problem with serving jury duty, but I'm not a religious man, and as such, I don't feel that I should have to take an oath that has a religious clause in it." And to my pleasant surprise, he was very understanding about that, and he told me, "You'll get a secular affirmation.
Okay.
If you ask for it, you will get that, and you'll not be." So I was like, okay. So I just left and went home, and I was selected for a jury not long after that. But what was interesting was were you selected? Were you in a jury, or did you bow out?
Well, I pre-registered over the internet, so this is actually where the lawyers ask you questions or whatever.
Okay.
I was excluded from the particular trial that was going on. I don't believe it was to do with this, with some other things.
Because I ended up on a jury. And what was interesting is, when it came time to do that oath, I just sort of like gritted my teeth and was like, "Oh, here it comes." But in the court, the judge gave a secular affirmation without my having to ask for it. He just said, "Do you solemnly affirm to, uphold your duties in da-da-da-da-da," and with no God oath, and I was, caught, once again, very pleasant surprise. So I guess it depends on the situation you're in, or the court you're in, or the judge you're dealing with, but I think that once again, in the interest of fairness, that secular affirmation should be part of, the big open call that they have in the gym, for where everyone stands up. Because at that moment, I felt like, well, I can't do this. Now, of course, it just seems a lot of people are scratching their heads because I think everybody does their damnedest to get out of jury duty when you get the card in the mail. But but I was thinking, hey, okay, if I do this, maybe I won't be called for another few years. And but here right now, being compelled to take a religious oath, I'm feeling like I'm being excluded from being allowed to do what I'm told is my civic duty. Yeah. So again, it's going to be more people coming out and addressing this matter and bringing it to the fore and saying, "Hey, we need to make this more inclusive," I think is what's going to change that. But I don't know exactly what the precise Texas law is on that. I have to look that up.
Yeah, well, maybe the law was changed where it's not required. But I just think singling me out in front of 50 of my peers and requiring me to have to talk to the judge specifically in front of everyone and say I'm an atheist, say that I need a civil oath. It's wrong.
It's exactly what all of this is about. It's a coercive act.
Yeah.
They're essentially singling you out in a way and saying, you are different.
Yeah, it puts it's an attempt to have it both ways, right? I mean, they say, "Oh, well, you don't have to say this if you don't want to."
Yeah.
But if you don't say it, there's going to be this big spotlight on you.
Yeah.
And that will put you in a position. And I don't think we should have any circumstance, especially any circumstance in this country that is being sponsored by any kind of government institution that puts citizens in a position of feeling like, "Uh-oh, I'm the unwelcome weird guy here who's not part of."
And apparently the Supreme Court agrees with you.
Yeah.
So
they do. So that's the situation. Is any situation where an American citizen has a big scarlet letter implanted on their body, simply because of what they choose not to believe, and that's not a situation our government should put any American person in, any member of the public. Dennis, is anything else for us?
No, that'll be it.
All right, thanks.
Thanks.
Boy, so many ideas jumbling back in my head. I was just trying to get them all out at once. Sue is up next on line 3. Let's see what we have to go on. Sue.
Hi,
Hi, you're on the air. Thanks for waiting.
I was, I don't know, alarmed by all of the furor that I saw to just jump on the under God bandwagon, not only by our politicians, but our media and everything else. And one of the things, well, two of the things that I've heard, one of which is it's our heritage, but I'm just a little older than you gentlemen, and I actually learned it the other way first.
Yeah.
And I've had trouble since. Every once in a while I forget where it goes. You know, does it go after this word or after that word? Because it's not the way I actually learned it.
Yeah.
And so heritage is like, I'm not sure that I've created my own heritage. And the second thing is, how can these people that are so, I don't know, they use the phrase, well, it's really kind of meaningless, just symbolic. It's you can say it anyway, and it's just you're not asking it. How can they allow the rest of the words to be watered down that way? How can they take, if you can say part of it without it having any meaning, you could say all of it without it having any meaning.
That's true.
And it takes away what does liberty and freedom, what do those words mean?
Well, what does God mean when it becomes part of a rote memorized statement that people are compelled to say? That's an interesting point that you bring up. Is that you mentioned when asked to defend the presence of the clause under God in the Constitution, immediately the defenders will say, oh, well, it's really just a broad statement and it can mean anything anybody wants. And I find that a very bizarre thing for a religious person to say, because I was always under the impression, particularly that Christians and people who profess a strong religious belief, that they have very, very devout and clear ideas of what they mean when they refer to God, the deity whom they worship. And the very idea of homogenizing this being to become this sort of God with a small g, the vague concept that gets to mean what you feel like, is a way, it trivializes their own beliefs in a very strange way. But it's only by trivializing that belief that they're able to defend having a clause in the Pledge of Allegiance that is somehow magically not offensive.
Yeah.
So that to me is a kind of an ironic thing that I hear from people who are defending religious activity sponsored or put forth by our government.
Yeah.
And
they don't
doesn't add up.
Yeah, they don't actually believe that under God is a wishy-washy statement that doesn't really mean anything. But that's what they'll say if they get to keep it in for that. So yeah, it's just double backing.
Yeah, I mean, the whole point of of having a religious belief is that you have this firm, devout conviction of a belief system.
Yeah.
And if suddenly you're allowing yourself to refer to God in a way that does not reflect that devout conviction, and instead is just referring to God in this vague manner that's not going to offend Joe over here who goes to a different church, or Fred over here who has a completely different, who's a deist and who, or somebody who worships trees or what have you. That just seems to run counter to the whole point of being religious in the first place.
Yeah.
And being affiliated with a particular belief system and creed. So why they would do that is kind of puzzling to me. It's all about, maybe it gets back to what we were discussing earlier with our atheist caller, whose name I think it wasn't, no, Norman was our Christian caller, one of our Christian callers, I think. But he was mentioning Howard. Howard, that's the guy. The guy who was mentioning, as long as you believe something, as long as you have believe some concept
belief,
of God,
then you're okay.
That makes you an okay guy, and that makes you better than somebody who doesn't. So.
Yeah, the reaction kind of fits into the love it or leave it attitude that seems to be so prevalent right now. That kind of alarms me a little bit. I mean, like I said, I'm a little older. I remember some of the downsides of the 60s and being people protesting for rights, and some of the abuses that were going on for civil rights during that period. And I don't like the love it or leave it attitude. I think opinion is what makes America great, and as soon as we squelch opinion, whether it's religious or political, we've done a great disservice to our great country. That's the problem. They don't understand that we love our country just as much as everybody else.
Yeah.
You know, and we do.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for listening to me.
Yeah, we appreciate
Thanks
your
for
call.
calling.
Thanks for calling, Steve. You can call back anytime.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. And of course, we'd like to remind all unbelievers out there in the Peanut Gallery of our bagel shop meetings, which are Sunday morning, 10:30 a.m. at Hot Jumbo Bagels. That's downtown on 5th Street, between Guadalupe and Lavaca. These are meetings for unbelievers only, please. And if you're an atheist and you are feeling a little isolated and a little bit like the unwelcome person with the scarlet letter on you, come on out and meet some other atheists and
a good
some
time.
folks that you might have a good time talking to. I think Will's back.
Yep.
We have 5 minutes. We'll see what he has to say, and then we'll sign off for the day. Hello, Will.
Yeah, I know you guys are running out of time, so I'll make this quick. I
Okay, that's
just
cool.
have 2 comments.
Okay.
The guy who asked about the Declaration of Independence.
Mm-hmm.
There is reference to a creator, but that is not necessarily a person. According to all 6 versions of string theory and O3 electrodynamics, the universe was created as essentially a quantum fluctuation in the vacuum.
That's one theory.
Right.
Yeah, I mean,
would say
we
it
don't
could
know
be
how we got a universe yet, but it's
Right.
still an open question.
Something, some force, it exists, it was created at some point, or perhaps it existed forever. The existence itself is what imbues you with those inalienable rights. That's at least my interpretation of what it means when it says that.
Inalienable rights are given to us by ourselves. We make this stuff up.
Well, it's not that we make it up, right? Here's our rights. Okay, here's my take on it. Everything that we have done, every human accomplishment, okay, from the beginning of human civilization up to now, where we have our current governments and the way America, everything that we do is the result of applied knowledge.
Yes.
Okay, it's the result of people working hard to try to make a society work for everyone, and learning from the mistakes of the past. Hopefully, I mean, many people don't, right? I mean, there's that the phrase, the more we know about those who don't know the past are doomed to repeat it.
Yes.
But of course, many times some people who know the past go ahead and repeat it on purpose, which is kind of scary. But every human accomplishment, and particularly cultural and political, is the result, I think, of applying the scientific principle of learn from your mistakes, get out there, work hard, and apply your knowledge. Apply the knowledge that you have of previous circumstances and situations, the knowledge that you have of history, to our present situation, and let's try to make everything better. And so that is where the concept of rights comes from. Okay, rights haven't always been this inalienable thing. I mean, all throughout history, right? You have had, even up into recent history, certain groups of people having less rights than other groups of people, and it has only been through a long, slow, and often bloody struggle throughout centuries that we're getting now to the point where the color of your skin shouldn't matter, your creed shouldn't matter, what you profess to believe shouldn't matter, whether you are a vegetarian or a hamburger lover shouldn't matter. If you're a person, okay, you deserve the same rights as this guy, that guy, and the other guy.
Yeah.
Okay, and this is something that we have fought and struggled and worked for. It's not something that we just gave to ourselves. Although I know what you meant to say, I mean, but it's not something that was given by any sort of external entity. It's something that every human being
that's not what I was saying.
has
I
fought
was saying
for.
that we exist.
All right.
That by our sheer existence, we have the right of self-preservation, of life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness.
I would agree with that.
Which is what that could be summed up to: self-preservation.
I'd agree with that.
And whatever you choose to believe created the universe, the fact that we exist imbues us with those rights, the right of self-preservation.
Well, I would hope so. Yeah, in principle, yeah, I think that's generally speaking.
I only mention that because I have an atheist friend, and I asked him about the Declaration of Independence, and that's how he explained it to me.
Well,
I think
that's an interesting take on it.
Also, the fellow who mentioned Christianity being antithetical to democracy.
Well,
and of course, I'm a little biased because I'm Christian, but that's patently false. I would agree with Terence McKenna's statement that without a judgment about Christ himself, Christianity is the most destructive force in history. It has destroyed more civilizations, more people, repressed more people. That's not true Christianity.
Well, now we're getting into another entirely thorny issue that in the last 60 seconds of our show we don't have time to get into. But feel free to call back next Sunday, and we'll be happy to tackle that one. I think that there's a, how do you understand what true Christianity is? I think that's up to Christians to work out. But we appreciate hearing from you. Thanks very much, and we've got to go now. All right, we're here every Sunday, 4:30 p.m. on Channel 10. Feel free to call in. Visit our lovely website, atheist-community.org, for more information about us. And I think that's it. I want to thank all of our great crew. Thanks to Michael Newdow out in Sacramento, California, for fighting the good fight. And Christians, we don't hate you. We just think you're wrong. Thanks very much. We love you, Austin. Here's our love rings going out.
We will see you next week.
We will.